And then your players all of a sudden come in and say, "Oh, are there any like red-crested breagles that happen to live in this place?" And you're like, I don't know, make a perception check. Yeah, I got a 28 on that. I guess there is one. Something big happened that we kind of have to talk about, which is that Wizard did a giant presentation, Wizards of the Coast, for 2022, where they were talking about future plans over the next couple years for mostly Dungeons & Dragons and Magic the Gathering. And you know what? We kind of have a little bit of experience with those two games.
A little bit.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm going to just jump into the big announcement, and then we'll talk about some of the smaller ones. Big announcement is that Wizards is working on draft material for something called One D&D. That would be basically the new version of Dungeons and Dragons. Now, I say that, but they're doing kind of a can I have my cake and eat it too, by, revamping a lot of the rules, but also making it all compatible with 5e, so that any current 5e material is still usable.
Right. They're like, 60 sounds like a way to not make people want to buy it. Right. And 5e seems to be working really well, so they're like, well, we're going to stick with this for as long as we can.
The general I think what they're trying to think of in the back of their heads is that so many people jumped into this, like when they got real popular, everyone's used to 5e. And by and large, besides nitpicky stuff people might have, folks like the system and don't have a lot of interest in not using it anymore. So they had some of the team come on to talk about different rule sets that they wanted to revise. One of the things that they were talking about too was going back over to like the Dungeon Master Guide and make it easier for new GMs or DMs to really be able to run right out of the gate, which is great. Make it a little bit more streamlined. And then also announce that there is going to be some draft material, which we will go over in the next segment. But generally trying to get some feedback in, because come 2024, they're hoping to be able to launch this and bring something out. So we'll see what happens with it. I didn't know if you had thoughts about that, because basically what they're saying is that the age of editions is over. They're not going to do 5, 6, 7e. It's just going to be One D&D.
I think it's interesting. It's definitely a bold type of move.
Oh, yeah.
Where they've done the edition thing for a while. Even though I know Magic, for instance, doesn't have quite the same. I mean, it's got core editions, but
yeah,
they don't really overhaul the rules between them, as an example.
No, they do make some cards illegal or restricted in certain
but as far as like role-playing games, it's not generally the iteration you see done.
Yeah.
Video games, you tend to see, we're just gonna patch this game until it's good, No Man's Sky style. 6 years later, you've got a completely different game than what you started with.
Sure.
But to do it with an RPG system in this sense, is interesting, because it means, especially where everything that they want to do should be compatible with 5e.
Yes,
and it's just more 5e. So if they change drastic things in there, they'll have to give those rules away pretty much for free.
Right.
Which they do with the basic rules anyways, but it also means that your old players' handbooks and old DMs guides are outdated.
Are useless, right?
It's akin to 3.5 not being a new edition, but having some things fixed in their books. So you had the core rulebook 3 and then player's handbook like 3.5.
Right. And I think the thought process for me is that they would very much like to sell a new like player's guide or Dungeons Master Guide with updated rules. But they can't really justify selling any new material, or especially the stuff that they're coming out with now over the next couple of years, while also saying this system is going to be completely useless to you. And it's not going to be what everybody uses, because they are also talking about like Dragonlance is going to be coming out. They just had Spelljammer and all these other settings that are all built around 5e. So is that all just going to get scrapped?
Right, and I don't think that would happen. I mean, a campaign setting typically just takes the core rules from that edition anyways, except for where they change certain rules to fit the setting.
Sure.
So I don't think that would be a big deal.
Okay, gotcha. In other kind of like D&D based news too, is they talked a little bit more about, since they acquired D&D Beyond, as we all know, and we're kind of shocked that they didn't already own it. They are using it much more for an actual digital platform for the game. So One of those nice things is that there will be like a physical plus digital version, so that you can get the physical book and you will also unlock the digital one on your account, which we were hoping for.
Yes.
And they are doing that.
Perfect. Good move.
It is a good move. Smart move. In addition to that, though, they are also planning to... They're kind of going for Roll D&D. They're kind of going for the head. They're going for the throat. And they are going to be using it to create this, like, digital play experience. They're going to make, like, the digital tabletop that you can actually put monsters in. It would be really cool, too, if you got, like, the supplements and then the monsters and everything from that went into the thing, or that it would automatically load up the dungeons that were in the campaign to it. But in general, yeah, that you'd be able to have what is, to be honest with you, a pretty impressive looking 3-dimensional, full lighting, graphics, the whole thing. I think it's an Unreal. That
Probably.
It probably is in like a very nice engine where you would be able to purposely put down all of your, figurines essentially into the map itself and make like an actual digital landscape that you could play in and use also for tactical. Smart move.
Interesting they do that where stuff like that already exists, of course.
Right.
But it's interesting that they want to go towards that type of thing because it becomes a totally different game than most players are probably used to, and most dungeon masters are used to, where playing at the table with just the books, Theater of the Mind style, and maybe occasionally maps, it means you have a lot of leeway. But in this case, even if they make the assets and the tools to do it super easy to use, I'm pretty sure like it's still going to be like, if I'm a DM and I want to build a campaign in this, suddenly I've got to take the entire time to either use a pre-generated world setting that's already got maps and stuff, or I've got to make my own.
Right. You bring up a good point too, because I keep thinking to myself, well, okay, if we have that map and it's all laid out, and I'm going to assume that maybe you can't necessarily plug and play, maybe you could, but you can't find a certain asset, and then your players all of a sudden come in and say, oh, are there any, like, red-crested breagles that happen to live in this place? And you're like, I don't know, make a perception check. Yeah, I got a 28 on that. I guess there is one. I don't know what that
like,
asset is.
Okay, I've got this road going through here, and your players go, we're going to go through the forest over there. And you're like, I haven't mapped any of that out.
I don't think we have the map for
it. Are you going to have tools on demand for on-the-fly generation of areas then?
That's going to be tricky, especially if they have to do like all of Faerun or like the whole Eberron set. Like, what are they supposed to do with that?
It makes it a lot less freeform than actually helping it be that experience, which is fine in a lot of cases. Sure. But yeah, I don't want to be like, I made this whole thing, and my players go, we're going to go the other ways. I'm going to go, well, this entire map I just made in 3D with all the software tools is now useless.
Yeah, exactly. In other news around that, of course, Dragonlance, like I mentioned, is going to be coming out in late 22. 23, they're going to be doing this Keys from the Golden Vault, which is kind of like an Ocean's 11 sort of heist. And Big B Presents which Glory of the Giants, which is sort of like Fizzban's Treasury of Dragons, but it's giant focused. And then also the Book of Many Things is going to be like its own actual thing.
Great.
So instead of like the Deck of Many Things, now you got the Book of Many Things.
Yeah, it's just an encyclopedia.
Yeah, exactly. A couple campaigns that they're going to be doing too. There's the Phandelver campaign, so they're taking the Lost Mines of Phandelver and they're actually expanding it to a full like campaign that you can go through.
Okay.
Lost Mines, kind of well known as being that starter adventure that you get your feet wet in. And then also something called Planescape, which is going to be a little bit like Spelljammer, and it's going to have a setting guide and a bestiary and all sorts of fun things like that. So some stuff to look forward to. And of course in 22, after they've gone through Unearthed Arcana and all of that, they're going to have the One D&D. The One D&D to rule them all.
Right.
Magic the Gathering, like, we haven't played Magic for a while. So
Yeah.
I don't know the rules so much, but we did get a couple interesting things. Like, for instance, in Universes Beyond, they're going to do a Warhammer 40,000.
Yeah, Magic has been getting into the whole metaverse bullshit.
Yep.
Where they're like, we're gonna just make card sets for Magic based on other IP.
Oh, yeah.
And I think I find that dumb. Personally.
You do, yeah. Is it too much of like the multiverses kind of thing, or the Super Smash Brothers but for card games?
Yeah, it's like, okay, I get it, and I've listened to videos explaining what a metaverse is, where you enroll all these IPs into one thing so you can access them in that.
Right.
It's like the Scooby-Doo metaverse would be everyone that's ever been on Scooby-Doo.
Right.
As guest appearances. So like Supernatural is part of the Scooby-Doo metaverse as an example there.
Right.
But yeah, it's like if I wanted a Warhammer 40k card game, I'd play a Warhammer 40k card game. I wouldn't play Magic with a 40k skin.
Yeah.
Yeah,
at some point maybe we'll do a segment about like the actual kind of like multiverses idea, just because I've heard so many people say that there is like a little bit of a crossover. Like, in the one hand, it's kind of cool to see all of these characters from disparate areas like come together and like be in one space, but at the same time it takes them completely out of context, and now you have like Scooby-Doo right next to Arya Stark, and you're like, that doesn't make any sense. Scooby-Doo has Scooby Snacks and uncovers like people with that hate meddling kids. Arya Stark kills people with her sword in Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
These two don't mesh.
Yeah.
These two don't make sense.
Like I would like the Emperor of Mankind from Warhammer, to come into Magic and just go, I'm just gonna smite y'all.
Yeah. Well, speaking of which though, Alex, more than just Warhammer, we're also getting cards based on Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And we're also getting Doctor Who.
Oh yeah, I think I saw something about that too.
Yeah.
I don't just know.
If you
what
put
even?
If you put the Doctors into Magic cards, don't you just win?
In theory.
There's going to be commander decks and booster. So if the commander decks are there, what, you're just going to have like the 5th Doctor versus the 12th Doctor and see who did it better?
I don't even know.
I don't know.
I don't. Nope, not a fan.
Not a fan. Yeah. One of the things that they were talking about in that regard too, and I think it was mostly for like Middle Earth, is that they were going to do these borderless cards, and I have not seen them until this point. But the idea of borderless cards is that if you have all of the cards from like the set, it will actually, you put them next to each other and it actually creates like a much larger picture. So
yeah, Magic has done something like that before with the full picture lands they've done.
Yes.
Or the lands in Kamigawa, for instance, which was like the last set I played in, where if you got the like mountains and there were like 4 variants of it and you had them in the right order of printing, it would make a panorama.
Yeah. They're doing something to that effect, but it's going to be for Middle Earth. So you'll see like the battle, I think, for like Helm's Deep. You'll be able to see that whole thing if you collect like the 30 cards that are part of it.
Yeah, because Let's make it more of a
times.
collector game.
Yeah. They also spent a long time talking about Phyrexia. All will be one. So that's like a whole... There's a lot of lore around it, which I don't really understand. I don't...
Yeah, Magic has a lot of lore.
Yeah.
No one, like, barely anyone pays attention to it, I think.
No, I think that, you know, Magic doesn't really lend itself to experiencing the lore of the world quite as much as like a Dungeons and Dragons, because you're not playing an individual character. You just have a deck of cards with these characters in them. Now, what I did see though is the idea that they're going to be taking a lot of cards with the legendary creatures, and they're going to be redoing the art and changing them up a little bit so that it looks like they've been in this world for a lot longer and maybe have faced corruption or been war-torn from the experience. And they're going to have ones that make the different characters look like they're in stained glass, which kind of looks cool, like they're in stained glass reliefs. Neat stuff, but I don't know if it's going to make me go back to playing. I haven't played in a while.
Definitely won't.
Yeah, it's not something I can play by myself, and bringing a deck with me anywhere doesn't exactly make you the popular kid. So, so I think I might have to just bail on that. But yeah, those were the big announcements that came out of their conference. It is, to be completely honest with you, a lot. I think it is a lot of content. I understand why they wanted to do a presentation. Those are big announcements, but I think most people are mostly focused on the fact that you're going to get this multiverses basically in Magic, and that you're going to be getting One D&D in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
So there's that. General thoughts about how any of that looks to you, if you care about it?
We'll find out as we discuss more in the next segments.
Yeah, because coming up, we're gonna get into a little bit of that play material and look at One D&D.